Welcome back to Kings of Columbus. Doug Lesmerises here on the Podcast Network, and we're doing Buckeye Beefs. If you ever heard me before, I did rants, and that was not just me ranting, although I am capable of that. It was you ranting with me. So I like it when we rant together. So we are going to rant together here. I had some people send in some things that are making them mad, concerned, worried, mostly about Ohio State football. It's a thing about life at the end. And if you would like to join us, you can send me an email and you can beef it. You can beef at me? Is that a thing? You can rant. It's a Buckeye beef. It's a beef. We want to get Cade Stover's family to sponsor this eventually. It's like a reverse NIL that maybe Cade Stover and his family farm, like maybe Cade Stover gets NIL, then he gives some of the NIL to us. And we talk about, oh, great beef at the Stover farm. Buckeye Beefs it's complaints, things that are on. It's not like a Q&A. It's complaining because that's one of the things that I'm best at. You can email me, send an email to doug@themediallc.com, themediallc.com, and then we can complain about things together, much like Liz complained with me about this. And I understand this, and there's a lot of people that are in this range of things. And sometimes your beefs are long. So I truncate your beefs. I worry, this is Liz in Palo Alto. That's where Stanford is. So maybe Liz will be following wherever Stanford goes with this new conference. I worry that Jim Knowles, the Ohio State defensive coordinator, is destined to maximize inferior talent. Like that's what he's best at. He's the Derek Coleman of coaches, the best player on bad teams. I think that it is reasonable and appropriate to question his suitability for the Ohio State opportunity. So I don't think it's inappropriate, but I'd wait. And I will tell you a name that popped up that you are not going to want to hear. This is only going to enhance the beef. This is going to season the beef. This is going to flavor the beef, right? It's like it'd be a little ribbon of fat in your beef. And you're going to be like, oh, that is a delicious beef. But you're going to want to consume more of it when I say this. Someone that I was talking to, like sort of secondhand, brought up a comparison between Jim Knowles and Don Brown. And Don Brown is the former Michigan defensive coordinator that I think people sort of feel like, did Ryan Day get him fired? Right? What Ohio State did to Michigan in 2018 and 2019 sort of signaled the end of Don Brown. So Don Brown was a defensive coordinator that wound up playing a lot of man and putting guys in situations. You'll remember Devin Bush, who was a first-round pick at linebacker for Michigan, trying to cover Demario McCall across the field. Ryan Day early on, like mesh routed Michigan to death. You just get them lined up and run crossing routes on man coverage, and the Michigan guys aren't fast enough to do it. So the idea, you don't want to be Don Brown. Now, the other thing is when Don Brown got to Michigan, by the Football Outsiders metric, and it's Brian Fremeau who actually does it now, the F+ ratings. I think they had a fight with Football Outsiders. They don't have the rankings there anymore. I'm going to have Brian Fremeau. I've corresponded with him. He's a good statistical analytics college football guy. I like his defensive and offensive ratings because it's not just raw stats. By his F+ defensive ratings, under Don Brown, Michigan in 2016 was the 5th ranked defense in the country. 2017 was 7th. 2018 was 14th. 2019 was 10th. 2020 was 91st, and everybody got fired. That horrible year for Michigan. Here's the thing. It's a lot about aggression. And I think one of the issues, and by the way, this thing, Liz, we're on the same page. I was beefing about this like the minute Jim Knowles got here. Because Jim Knowles got here, he's talking about the jack a lot, that position. And I sort of said, well, what if you had Chase Young? And he said, if we had Chase Young, we'll let Chase Young be Chase Young. It's like, okay. So I feel like, Liz, what you're a little worried about is if you believe he is best at maximizing lesser talent, which I think is fair to say what they had at Oklahoma State was lesser talent, although Oklahoma State has more guys drafted defensively the last 2 years than Ohio State has. Okay. So I think he did maximize that. So then do you say to yourself, when you get to a place with more talent, do you not know what to do with it? I think two things are at play here. I think maybe But I also think the Ohio State defensive talent last year wasn't as good as it should be. So it wasn't up to the Ohio State standard. So when you ask the question, what would Jim Knowles do with Chase Young? Part of the answer is, where's Chase Young on this defense? So I do think I think it's more the other thing, which is that the talent on the Ohio State defense in 2021 and 22 was not up to the Ohio State standard. And if you get back to that standard, and 2019 it's a high standard, but if you get back to a Chase Young, Jeff Okudah standard, Malik Harrison, Damon Arnett, if you get back to that, will Jim Knowles know what to do with it? I think he will. Now, I think you've got to pull back on the aggression a little bit, but I think Ohio State brought in Jim Knowles because their talent wasn't good enough defensively in 2020 and 2021. And then with Kerry Combs, it felt like, well, then you weren't scheming it up enough when you don't have the talent. At its best back in the day, Ohio State said, we're going to do a 4-man rush and we're going to play man coverage on the outside, and we're going to bet that you can't block us and your receivers can't beat us in coverage. And more often than not, when you have that talent at corner and that talent at edge rusher, they can't. Okay, the talent dips. Now you need more scheme. Okay, you bring in a schemer, and now you're worried that the schemer's not going to know what to do with the talent, when the whole reason the schemer's here is because the talent wasn't good enough. So you have to wait. I just would tell Liz and everybody else, don't question it too hard yet. Be on alert. But I do think when you think about everybody back on defense this year, I think the talent will be lifted. And I do think I'm buying the discussion around Jim Knowles and everybody else. Hey, year 2 of the defense, you let it rip a little bit more. Guys aren't just learning and thinking as much. They're going to go play. And then if the guys going to play are Lathan Ransom and Tommy Eichenberg and JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer and Mike Hall and Steele Chambers and Jordan Hancock and Davison and Mignosin, Sonny Styles. We have a defensive pod. We have another Kings coming soon. Landis and I are going to talk a lot about how good the talent is on defense and how important that is to winning a national title. So we'll dive in more on that. On alert for this, don't beef too much about it yet, because I think last year, listen, the thing is Jim Knowles being too aggressive. You think about the plays that killed Ohio State. It's the blitz on the for the first touchdown in the Michigan game. J.J. McCarthy gets it off. Cam Brown misses a tackle. Okay, Cam Brown at corner is at the Ohio State talent standard. He doesn't get drafted. You think about the very first play of Jim Knowles as a defensive coordinator. Corner blitz. You put Josh Proctor in a position one-on-one. He misses a tackle on Lorenzo Styles. It turns into a 50-yard game. Josh Proctor, he's not going to start this year. He's not going to get drafted. Is that the Ohio State standard of talent? Cam Martinez gets locked up in one-on-one coverage with them. Michigan runs a guy at him out of the slot. He gets spun in a circle, gets beat. Is Cam Martinez the threshold of talent in the Ohio State secondary? He's probably not going to start this year. And then Lathan Ransom in coverage against Georgia. Again, you wind up with less than your best cover guys. This isn't Marshawn Lattimore and Denzel Ward getting beat. So I think it's possible that once it pairs up at its best, Jim Knowles' scheme and his aggression will pair nicely with a very talented Ohio State defense. The talent hasn't been there. It hasn't been. Only by its own standard. So I get where you're coming from, Liz. I wouldn't go all the way there yet. Give it another year, and then we can really evaluate this. All right. This is Tommy in New York. There's a vicious cycle going on with defensive recruiting and player acquisition. We are fighting tooth and nail to fill up the defensive class with absolutely no room for error. Seeing that and expecting to change back to the silver bullets is just hard to rationalize. So no disagreement, right? I don't know that anybody would be like, oh, no. Defensive recruiting at Ohio State. Fantastic. We have to get our context, because I also think our context possibly has been thrown off, because there's a standard. There's no better standard to compare Ohio State to than its own standard. But I also don't think we can seize on the absolute peak of Ohio State performance and believe the peak is the new standard. And I think the defensive recruiting in the class of 2017 in particular has thrown us off a little bit. What I really think we are talking about with a lot of this is elite non-Ohio defensive recruits. And are they getting those guys? So, defensive recruits ranked among the top 100 players in the country the last like 10 or 11 years. Okay, here we go. 2013, there were 5. 2014, there were 6. These are top 100 players on the defensive side of the ball that signed with Ohio State. 2013, 5, 2014, 6, 2015, 4, 2016, 4, 2017, 6, 2018, 6. Man, that's a lot. 2019, 2 or 1, because one of the 2 is Cade Stover, who was signed as a linebacker, moved to tight end. If I'm being nice, I'll give him 2. 2021, 2021, 6, 2022, 4, 2023, 3, 2024 class currently right now that they're recruiting, 2. So here's the real question. That's just the overall numbers. You are, of course, in recruiting, especially at a place like Ohio State, you are somewhat beholden to local talent. Let's talk about national defensive recruiting. In the 6 classes between 2013 and 2018, Ohio State signed 21 top 100 defensive players from out of state. In the 6 classes since then, and this includes the 2024 class, so they might add a couple to this, they've signed 9. 21 to 9. Out of state top 100 defensive players. So the 2017 class that throws this off, they signed 6 top 100 defensive players, and they were all from out of state. Chase Young from Maryland, Jeff Okudah, Baron Browning from Texas, Haskell Garrett from Nevada, Isaiah Pryor's from out of state, and Sean Wade is from Florida. That can't be the standard. That is high. That's too high. 2018, they signed 4 from out of state. It's too high. I think 3 is maybe a fair number to shoot for. You look at the 2021 class, and this is showing up right now. The 2021 class, which is why it feels like the defensive talent standard for this season could be back to the Ohio State standard. There were 6 top 100 guys in the defensive guys in the class of 2021. 3 were in state, 3 were out of state. So you had Jack Sawyer, Mike Hall, and Reed Carrico from in state. And you had JT Tuimoloau, Jordan Hancock, and J.K. Johnson from out of state. J.K. Johnson is now transferred to LSU. But you think about what Sawyer and Hall and JT and Hancock are. That's 4 of your 11 starters on defense. Our 3rd year top 100 defensive players. Okay. 2 in 2022, Amari Abor and Kenyatta Jackson. Kenyatta Jackson might make an impact this year. 2 in the class of 2023. Calvin Simpson Hunt, that was a Tim Walton get out of Texas at corner that people are very excited about, and Jason Moore on the defensive line. And then right now in the class of 2024, the only one's Justin Scott, the defensive lineman from Chicago that was a big get. You can't expect 6. I think we can set the threshold and the standard of top 100 out-of-state defensive players for Ohio State to get in a cycle at 3. And they haven't been hitting it. Now, you think about all the guys that they were close on. This is also part of the frustration because they're very publicly trying and finishing 2nd and 3rd for some guys they really want. I think you really should worry when they stop trying. If they say, because there are things like Ryan Day has said stuff over time. And this is the thing. I went like last summer, I went to the NIL meeting that Ryan Day and Gene Smith had with business community leaders in Columbus. And I don't know why I got it. Like I signed up. It wasn't like a media thing. I like signed up and had a Cleveland. That's when I worked at Cleveland.com. Now I'd have the podcast. I had a placard for my table. I was like, oh, maybe Cleveland.com. I was like, does Demario McCall want to get $25 from us to be on our podcast? I actually tried that. Didn't work. So I went to that thing, and that's the day that Ryan Day said it would take $13 million in NIL to keep the roster together. That's when I got that. That world, they outlined sort of what they felt they needed to do. But on that day, Ryan Day also sort of expressed there, and has expressed before and since, the idea of maybe you get more local. Maybe the result of NIL is you pull back nationally. Maybe the result of NIL is you've got to lean on your Ohio talent even more. And I think we've seen that to some extent, like on the offensive line. I understand that, but that's when the game changes, when you pull back. Now, I can understand getting more targeted, but I think some high-profile misses, do I want to say it's good? No. Do I want to say failure is good? And failure is a tough word. Not winning a recruiting battle. Is it good? Now we're in the discussion of like, hey, the Georgia loss last year. Was it a good loss? I think it was the best loss in Ohio State history. Was it a good loss? I think you could argue. It's one like Tywan Malone. You didn't get Tywan Malone. He went to Ole Miss. It was a good loss because then when he transferred, you were lined up. We've talked a lot about that. That comes up a lot. Planting seeds, finish second, establish relationships, be there if it doesn't work out. I think there were probably 5 high-profile misses. Maybe you guys would have more than this. Keon Keeley, defensive lineman, goes to Bama last year. This is class of 2023, the ones that have you beefing. Keon Keeley goes to Bama. Damon Wilson goes to Georgia. Mateo Uyunglele goes to Oregon. All 3 of those guys in the defensive line, you would have liked at least one of those. Tackett Curtis, Louisiana linebacker, is a high-profile loss to USC because it's far. He's going far. You didn't lose to LSU, and you couldn't seal the deal, and there's good reports at USC about Tackett Curtis. He would help them. Although Ohio State has C.J. Hicks, they're not going to play him. At least not going to start him. And then Caleb Downs is the most high-profile. He goes to Bama. Ohio State really wanted Caleb Downs. So that's 5 guys you didn't win on last year nationally, most of them top 100 defensively, that have you beefing. All right, this year, Marquise Lightfoot, Chicago area defensive lineman, goes to Miami. You're beefing. Dylan Stewart, right, DMV, defensive lineman, goes to South Carolina. You're beefing. Kingston Viliamo Asa, California linebacker, goes to Notre Dame. He's just outside the top 100. You're beefing. KJ Bolden, Georgia safety, picks Florida State. You don't even lose KJ Bolden to in-state Georgia. He goes to Florida State. You're beefing. And then Peyton Woodyard, who's the California safety that I think it committed to Georgia, and you thought he was maybe going to maybe flip to USC. He flips to Bama. But Ohio State would have been interested, I think, in having him flip here. So that's 5 more. So that's 10 in these 2 most recent recruiting classes where you are seeing Ohio State not win for major high-profile guys. And it feels like along the way, there was a time in the pursuit where you thought they were going to win. So, are you frustrated? Yes. Do they have to go 10 for 10? No. If they had added probably one more guy, one more last year, one more this year so far, and again, you can't, like, they got Justin Scott, so you can't only count the losses. So I'm not going to say they're 0 for 10. But those 10 guys I listed, if they would have gotten 2 of those, I think you'd probably be fine. I don't even know that we'd be beefing. And they have some more guys on the board that they're going after. So what's at play here? Okay, let's look back at when they got the 6 guys from out of state in 2016. The 4 defensive coaches back then were Luke Fickell, linebackers coach, Larry Johnson on the defensive line, Kerry Combs in the secondary, and then Greg Schiano. I would say at that point in time, Luke Fickell, Kerry Combs, and Larry Johnson were probably all at the height of their powers as recruiters, and they were all elite. Who are the elite recruiters right now on the defensive staff? I think what Tim Walton is doing at corner, and Berm has covered this, I think we all see it. I think he's making that claim. He's doing some excellent stuff on the recruiting trail. Perry Eliano, has he pulled a safety so far that you didn't expect him to get? That's as a guy. Listen, you guys know, Berm's a guy, right? But I have opinions. I'm old. Go get a guy from out of state that doesn't have an Ohio State connection, that wouldn't be here for every coaching staff, and hang that skin on the wall and, ooh, mama. Okay, now we're talking. I don't know that Perry Eliano's had that yet. Jim Knowles at linebacker has not had that yet. And Al Washington, Cody Simon from New Jersey was a top 100 guy at linebacker who would fit that bill for Al Washington. But there were a lot of other guys that you thought maybe he was going to pull that didn't happen. And then on the defensive line, Larry Johnson is no longer at the height of his powers. So you go from, I would say, and Schiano, his former head coach. I would say that defensive staff in 2016, when you're pulling Chase Young, he comes to the Friday Night Lights. He commits to Larry Johnson at the camp, right? The Kerry Combs and Luke Fickell and everybody, they're going into Texas and pulling out Baron Browning. Right? What are we talking about? They're pulling Sean Wade out of Jacksonville. And then Urban on top of that, right? Height of their powers, they're not there. So I don't know that the strategy's off anymore. I don't know that the NIL is off. It's better than it was. You know, you talk to people and you hear things, and it feels like there are still things that people maybe think are happening related to the murky, unofficial NIL world where Ohio State's very competitive, but maybe there are some things they're not doing that people in the South are doing, which is a discussion that says existed since college football was founded. But they need more guys at the peak of their powers as recruiters. Jim Knowles is not that, but Jim Knowles is here to scheme. Larry Johnson is not that anymore. Would Larry Johnson of 2023 pull Chase Young out of Maryland? I don't know. Maybe, but I think the chances maybe would go down. And Perry Eliano, we don't know yet. So this is, I mean, there's a bunch of questions that circulate around this. I think they should have a fifth defensive coach. So I think I would use the Parker Fleming special team spot. They have 10 assistants. They have 5 full-time on offense. Their head coach's offense. So really, right, it's an 11-man staff, head coach, 10 assistants. They have 6 of them are all offense. Parker Fleming is special teams. He helps with the defense, but he's an offensive guy by trade, and it's only 4 defensive guys. I think the staffing is off. I would use the Parker Fleming spot to hire James Laurinaitis full-time. James Laurinaitis, Peyton Pierce, linebacker out of Texas, isn't top 100. He's top 150 national recruit. That's all James Laurinaitis. That's a poll by James Laurinaitis. So I think you let Knowles scheme, but the idea that, like, that's not why he's here, but they need help. So they need people to go close people and build relationships and win things you don't expect defensively. Brian Hartline wins in the receiver room. Tony Alford doesn't always win, but he wins sometimes. Tony Alford gets some wins. Ryan Day and Corey Dennis win at quarterback. So, you know, we'll see what Keenan Bailey does. And Keenan Bailey, I think, has a chance to do that. And Justin Fry, frankly, needs to go win a tackle. Justin Fry the offensive line coach needs to go win a national tackle. So I understand your frustration. I think if they had 2 of those 10 go a different way, you'd feel differently. You want them to keep trying, but you need some of these assistants to hang skins on the wall. But I think to expect Jim Knowles and Larry Johnson to pull those wins, I don't know that it's going to happen. And I'm not saying get rid of those guys. I'm saying give them help. Because James Laurinaitis, he can't go out and recruit as a not a full-time staff guy, not a full-time assistant. So I get where you are. I think you're right. But also don't expect a Chase Young, Jeff Okudah, Sean Wade class every year. That's not fair. But if we're going to look, 6 most recent classes, 9 top 100 defensive recruits, 6 classes before that, 21. That's too big of a gap. So they have to get back more to that. And I think they know that, but they have to be willing to make changes to do it. All right. This is from Chris in Central Ohio. I think the most frustrating thing about Ohio State football is that I don't have enough confidence in beating Michigan while not being sure that it matters. If we had just made the final field goal against Georgia last year, I think we would have won the national championship, and then I guess the rest would just be fine. It's weird. It is weird. Get used to it. It doesn't have to be bad. Because here's the thing. So not beating Michigan is a frustration in and of itself. There's no disputing that. There's no dismissing that. There's no allowing that. While understanding that Michigan is good, and when Michigan's good, Ohio State's not going to beat them every year. Is it ever okay? It's never okay. In quotes, okay. But the idea that you can win the national championship without beating Michigan should be good. It shouldn't make you angsty. It's like a second swing. It's another at bat. So I'm going to keep talking about this. And you find, so I used to do 2 national college football pods 5 Ohio State pods a week, plus some Brown stuff. And I'd be like, then, radio shows and stuff. And you're like, I think I said this already, but where did I say it? So I've said this. Now I'm streamlined. I don't have to do any more Brown stuff. I don't miss that, actually. I don't miss that. And we're going to have our national college football discussions here on the podcast. So you are going to hear me say this again and again and again. Parallel paths. Beating Michigan is one thing. Winning a national title is a different thing. Embrace it. I would not be frustrated by it. It's 2 important goals. Now, I'm not going to say, I almost said equally, but then some of you would jump through the screen or your phone or your radio to your headphones, your earbuds to strangle me. Because some of you think the Michigan game is more important than a national title, and some of you think the national title is more important. I don't think we have to play that game. I think they both can be important, but you get 2 cracks at it. And so it's 2 super important things to Ohio State football, 2 huge goals. Try to go 2 for 2, but live in a world where 1 for 2 is better than 0 for 1, right? Then when it's the same thing, well, we didn't get where we wanted to go. So in a 12-team playoff, this is especially going to be the case because in a 12-team playoff, Ohio State, especially as the Pac-12 dies and we're consolidating the sport even more, the Big Ten previously, the 16-team Big Ten that we were expecting, we're going to get to some expansion and Michigan game stuff at the end, like logistics. We want to talk about football first, but I have those beefs queued. When you thought in 2024 the Big Ten was going to be 16 teams, you knew in that world, a 12-team playoff, a 16-team Big Ten, 3 spots in the playoff, minimum. 3 every year, you shoot for 4. Now, in a world where the Pac-12 doesn't exist, where it's 4 conferences, they're going to discuss, I think, taking away some of the automatic bids. I think they should still keep it at 6, especially if the remnants of the Pac-12 form, like combined with the Mountain West. I'm okay having 2 of the lesser conferences get automatic bids. You let the American or the Mountain West, if it gets down to 1, I guess that's okay, but don't take away the automatic bids. Give those teams something to fight for. But the Big Ten's chances are going to be enhanced. So that 2-loss Ohio State is in no matter what, even if one of the losses is to Michigan. So I would say it is weird, but it's the new weird, Chris and everybody else. Embrace the weird. And we have to let go of it. We have to let go of what it was, or we're just going to drive ourselves crazy. And that is not diminishing tradition to me. It is acknowledging and contextualizing change while continuing to embrace tradition and embracing progress. Because if you fight the progress, you're just going to make yourself mad because it's happening whether you like it or not. But you also should fight, and we will fight on your behalf to maintain the tradition. And it should be the best of both worlds. A Michigan game at or near the end of the season, which we'll get to, that really matters, that always matters. And a national championship goal that is related to beating Michigan, but not tied to beating Michigan. It enhances your chances of winning a national title if you beat Michigan, but you don't have to. But it doesn't lessen that. I don't think it should lessen that. And so I'm okay with some of the traditions in college football going away, because sometimes tradition is just a word for old, but the very best traditions, we got to keep those, man. We're going to fight like crazy to keep them. And every trial balloon that the Big Ten floats, we're going to push back. We're going to get your views and let the world know what Ohio State fans think and what Michigan fans think and what the most important fan bases, the largest, most boisterous fan bases think. That's what beefing's for. 2 paths. So I wouldn't let it frustrate you. I would aim for both. You hope Ohio State goes 2 for 2. You hope they don't go 0 for 2 like they have the past 2 years. But at least last year they made the playoff. National championship's tough. Jim Harbaugh got asked a question about national championship or bust at Big Ten Media Days, and I thought his answer was good because his answer was kind of like, what? Because I think made up stuff. Like, what, national championship or bust is what? That's like a hot take artist kind of thing. Like, oh, if you don't win the national championship, your season was a failure. It's like, it's for real. It's not Ricky Bobby. What is it? Second is First place losing. What does he say? If you ain't first, you're last. That's not true. It's not true. It's a nice thing for a guy with a Southern accent in a Wonder Bread jumpsuit to say. That's not actually how life works. There's a lot to the journey. There's a lot to trying hard. There's a lot to coming close that actually does matter. Or you can just wind up being a crazy person. So embrace it. They're not the same thing anymore. It used to be the same thing. How could Ohio State lose to Michigan and be the national champ? Anytime before last year, frankly, right? Would you thought it was possible? Because I thought it wouldn't be possible until the 12-team playoff. Then it almost happened last year. So last year was the first time it was ever possible. I understand it's new, but come around on it. Bama won a national title a year they lost to Auburn. Doesn't mean that the Auburn loss was okay, but the trophy was still shiny. So we'll get there together. It's okay. We'll beef together. All right. Let's go to our guy, Chip Minnick in Avon Lake. I hope that Ryan Day and the coaching staff will be much better about player rotation and substitution this coming season. With so much talent on the roster, it certainly would make sense for players to get into games that are well decided in the early to middle of the third quarter instead of late in the fourth quarter. And I know Chip was a little worried about the transfer portal. You want to get guys in so they don't think, like, I never get to play. I'm going to transfer. So this was a Kyle McCord discussion last year, and we talked a lot about it. Probably too much. I would play them. So one thing that was discussed last year when I brought this up to people was you don't want to put the backup. You don't necessarily want to run a full offense late in the game with the backup offensive line if you're not sure your backup offensive line can protect anybody, especially if you're playing a bad team that maybe has their first teamers still in. So that I get, especially if your backup, like, you know, your backup's one play away from being your starter at quarterback. And if your second team offensive line is like, we might get smoked. If we try to drop back and throw, our dude might get smoked. So I would play your first team offensive line with your backup quarterback a little more. And I would let that backup quarterback run the full offense more and let your second team skill be in with the first team O-line so you can be more functional. I think that's very legitimate. So there are like multiple facets to that. That's one thing I would keep my eye on. Another thing is the starters come to play, and it's not that fun to get pulled out in the middle of the third quarter, especially if guys are trying to win national awards. So it's hard to win the Heisman if you get pulled out one drive into the third quarter in every blowout. So I am not against starters staying in longer. What I am against is backups coming in and turtling. Backups coming in and turning in to a handoff turnstile. Backups coming in and you don't try anymore. So the thing that I would not ever worry about is in conference games blowing people out, because you're in the same conference. If you can't hang, go to a different conference. If you lose a conference game 80-0 and it hurts your feelings, go to a different conference. Like that drives me crazy. You can't rub it in against a conference foe. You're the same. You're acknowledging you're the same. You can't do it. You're in the same family. Don't do it to Youngstown State, right? So I get that. So I would have played Kyle McCord more last year. I would have let him throw. I don't think you have to come in and take it. I think the sportsmanship stuff about not running the real Ohio State with your backups in a conference game, I think the sportsmanship stuff is bonkers. It's only a 12-game season, man. If Rutgers can't hang, leave. Don't take the money. If you're worried about sportsmanship feelings, then don't take the money. You can say, hey, we'll worry about your feelings and we'll reduce your cut of the TV. Now, Oregon and Washington aren't going to get it all to start. You are taking a full share of you're taking a full share of the money? Then you get a full share of this. How do you like that? You get a full share of Kyle McCord because you got a full share of the TV money driven by Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State. So you get a full share of Dallin Hayden. You get a full share of Jaden Ballard. You don't get the handoff turnstile. Please do that. I do think perhaps the transfer portal part of this, and Chip did bring this up, I think it's kind of maybe a little more real. Like you do have, like coaches always talk about, like, once a guy commits, you keep recruiting him. You're still recruiting your backups. You're recruiting your special teams players until they're starters. And recruiting is just a word for keeping guys happy. So I would play them, and I would let them play. So it's really a sportsmanship argument. Don't be overly sportsmanshipy. Maybe Greg Schiano will get mad, and Ryan Day and Greg Schiano could have another finger-pointing contest, but everybody loved the finger-pointing contest. It was one of the highlights of last year. It's like, name the 10 coolest things that happened in an Ohio State football game last year. Ryan Day and Greg Schiano are pointing fingers at each other. And some of the photos look like the fingers might have been like 17 inches away. I'll put my finger 17 inches away from your face. Do you like that? Do you want some of that? People love that stuff, man. It's all good fun. All right. Matt in Atlanta. This is real life stuff. I'm convinced that people who back into parking spots think they are superior drivers and that they are special, when in reality, they are selfish, arrogant, and a danger to other people in the parking lot. This is mostly said in jest, but this is a big pet peeve of mine. Don't beef, Matt, and then back off the beef. Seize the beef. You're mad about people. So listen, one of the last podcasts I did at Buckeye Talk was an interview with an Ohio State professor who's an expert in traffic. And that was spurred in part because we had an argument on Buckeye Talk about backing into parking spots. And this is one of those things. I subscribe to this in life. And the traffic professor basically said this: our problems on the road really are just a reflection of our problems in the world. If we all did the same thing, whatever the thing was, if it's the same, we're good. And it works. When you watch the Jetsons, you guys watch the Jetsons, right? It was on in like the 70s. It's a spaceman cartoon. His boy Elroy. All the cars move at the same speed on the robot highway. They don't have like, it's everybody doing the same thing. The whole thing about autonomized cars, autonomized? Robot cars, we'll just call them robot cars, is that it's homogenous. It's the same. So as long as it's the same, it's all good. So if we all backed into parking spots, nobody would care. If we all drove in car, motor first, front end first into parking spots, then we wouldn't have anything to argue about. I don't know why people back in. It always seems like you're robbing the store. It's like, why are you backing in? So I'm the getaway driver. So because when I'm the getaway driver, I don't want to have to back out. Do you ever see that? Can you imagine if you're watching a bank robbery thing and then they come out and the getaway driver is parked and he's like, just let me, I got to back out. Is there anybody behind me? Oh, there's a lady with a shopping cart. Let me back. Oh, can you guys in the back seat look to see if there's anything? That never happens. So if you're the getaway driver, that's the only allowable thing. If ask somebody that the next time you see somebody in the grocery store parking lot backing into their parking spot, just say, you're the getaway driver for the grocery store robbery, and see what they say. Actually, don't say that. They'll probably punch you in the face. I don't know why you do it, because you are, to me, risking running into one of the cars parked there. And if you back out, I think there is just much less risk. If you back out, so you back in, especially if it's tight, why would you do it? If you're off a little bit, you might run into one of the cars. When you back out, I mean, I guess you could back into somebody who's coming by, but you just look and people are aware, right? So it's unnecessary risk to me. And I know the people who do back in say, no, it's actually less risky. I don't know. This is also one of those things. So when I'm at a restaurant, if the server doesn't write down my order, I am immediately on alert. Please write down my order, especially because I'm going to say no pickles or whatever. I'm going to say no mayo on that. So if you don't write down my order, I'm already on edge. But if you don't write down my order and then when my food comes, it's wrong, it is very hard for me to not go crazy. So if you insist on backing into your parking spot, I'm already on edge. But if you back into the spot and then scrape one of the cars next to you, I don't know what I would do. I might call I might call the cops. I might round up everybody in the parking lot at the grocery store and have a mob come over and confront you. What are you doing? A lot of this, if you have kids right at the pickup line at school, if everybody does the same thing, it's okay. But when people think, I'll just do this, but if everybody did what you did, it would mess up the system. I think if everybody backed in every single time, it would mess up the system. So that's where we get into selfish, arrogant, and a danger to other people. Like, you think you're better at this, or your plan is better. It's not the norm. And if everybody did it, it would be a problem. Like I do, like on the traffic podcast, when there's a merge at a construction thing on the highway and nobody's in the left lane and everybody waits in the right lane, I do go up the side when nobody's there, because I think if everybody did what I did, it actually would be better. If everybody continued to fill both lanes, then when you'd have a zipper merge and it would work. I think any behavior where if everybody did what you did, things would fall apart, then you shouldn't do it because you're not special. If everybody did what you did, things would be better, then I think it's okay to do the unusual thing. I don't think it would all be better if we all backed in. And I will tell you, there will be responses to this. Again, you can now email me. Email me your beefs to doug@themediallc.com. I guarantee I am going to get all the football stuff I said. They'll be like, yeah, Knowles, whatever. The parking spot thing, people are going to come at me, which is why we did a traffic pod on Buckeye Talk. Maybe we'll do a traffic pod here on the podcast one day. This is from Jason in Aurora, Ohio. This is a 3-pack. So now we're done with all the football and parking. And I want to get into the Michigan game, where it should be played. And I know Landis and Berm and Austin talked about this. I have not chimed in on this. And I also want to talk about the additions of Oregon and Washington. I just basically want to talk schedule with you guys here at the end. And this is logistics that matter. Because when we were at Big Ten Media Days, and this is still a thing that's hard for me, and I'm still getting used to this. When Ryan Day suggested possibly not playing the Ohio State-Michigan game in the last game of the regular season, I seized on that. I was like, what? And I didn't want to let that slide past. So I tried to bring out as much as possible from Ryan Day in that moment, because I thought it was a huge deal. And then I have not opined on it because I don't have a place to write, which is fine. But I also have not talked about it here. So here's why I thought that mattered, and we'll get into a more holistic scheduling discussion in a moment. But to answer Jason and Aurora, if someone thinks playing Michigan in back-to-back weeks lessens the importance of the first game, they don't understand the rivalry. So that was Ryan Day's contention, that if you got into a world where Ohio State and Michigan were both locked into the Big Ten championship game, as they would have been last year, coming into the regular season game, would it lessen the regular season game? Because win or lose, you're both going to play in the Big Ten championship game the next week, and you risk that. So first of all, I tried to look this up, and it's just the advent of the way things work right now. I don't know that in the history of college football, any teams have ever played each other in back-to-back weeks. So we are currently worrying about something that has never happened, I think. Because you think about, for instance, we've been in a world where championship games have been 2 division winners. And most of the time, those divisions, you're playing a team in your division in the last game of the regular season. So Auburn and Alabama can't play in the SEC championship game, at least the way it used to be. And like in the Big 12, they play a full round robin. They had when they were a 10-team league. They played a full round robin. You played the other 9 teams. And so you could have, and they've played a championship game with that format like the last, I think, since 2017. Because in 2014, they didn't have it, and TCU and Baylor both got the raw end of the deal when Ohio State got in, and they didn't, because the Big 12 didn't have a championship game. So it could have happened with the Big 12, but it hasn't. I don't think. I double-checked. It hasn't. And it hasn't happened anywhere else. So, and now you get into a world where, like in the ACC, if Clemson, divisionless ACC, if Clemson and Florida State are the 2 best teams, well, they don't play each other at the end of the year. They're not the rivals. Clemson plays South Carolina as their rival at the end of the year. South Carolina's in the SEC, so that's not going to happen. Pac-12 didn't happen. It just hasn't happened yet. So how worried should you be about it? Well, it definitely could happen in the new Big Ten. Definitely could. I also wonder if we're going to stay divisionless. If we're going to stay divisionless in the 18-team world. I wonder. But if you do, if it's never happened, does that mean don't worry about it until it does? Or does that mean preemptively worry about it? Because this has never happened before, but if it does, it would be terrible. Here's why I thought it mattered. You had the coach of one of the teams basically saying, if we're both locked into the Big Ten championship game, would I maybe not play my starters the full game? That's what I got from Ryan Day. If it doesn't matter. Now, Bengals, Browns, I think, played each other. This is an NFL thinking. Bengals, Browns play week 17 last year. Didn't matter. Joe Burrow didn't play. Whatever. So what should be a good Browns-Bengals rivalry, one of those games, it didn't matter. And they didn't play their guys. So it did affect that. This does happen in the NFL. You might have one of your, because in the NFL, I think often the 17th game of the regular season is a conference game. So for the Browns, you play the Bengals, maybe you'll play the Steelers, and it could be meaningless. The Browns and the Steelers, right? I think the year the Browns made the playoffs, they played the Steelers in the last game of the regular season, and the backups played, and then they played the Steelers again in the playoff game. It did diminish the regular season game. It did. But that's more okay in the NFL. When you have Ryan Day saying it, I'm on alert because he's in control of the roster. Now, I don't think Tressel would have ever said it. I don't think Urban would have ever said it. I don't think Earl Bruce would have ever said it. And Woody Hayes would come up out of his grave and kick anybody in the butt who said it. It doesn't mean I think Ryan Day is wrong to say it, but it's an NFL style thinking. So for Jason, for you to say that someone who says that doesn't understand the rivalry, I don't think if they don't understand the rivalry, they're just thinking big picture. If it enhances your chances of winning the national championship and you're going to try like crazy to win the Big Ten championship game against them, would you actually do it? Would you actually not have your team go 100%? And that would be based on the guys you play. Would you put in backups? Would you really do it? Would Ryan Day really, really do it? They're clinched. They're playing in the last game of the regular season. We're saying, Ryan, are you going to play your starters in the game in Ohio Stadium? Say this happens in 2024. No. Whew. That's hard for me to wrap my head around. I don't think he would actually do it. Now, usually we talk about all those things you save. People, it's one of the most popular things through the course of a season. What's Ohio State saving for the Michigan game? What should you save? Maybe you'd save that for the next matchup. But would you at least play your guys? I think you probably would wind up doing it. But I understand the discussion. So I would say this. There's some schedule stuff that I've been tinkering with where I think, there's a thing I think the Big Ten could do on the last week of the regular season that would almost be to play like a semifinal round. If you somehow had Big Ten semifinals that were up in the air where the top 4 teams were going to play each other, but maybe you ensured that nobody could play who had played the week before. So that would be your last game of the regular season. And then everybody else in the league also plays. So there's all kinds of cross games where it's like the 4 best are playing and the next 4 play each other. And you have matchups that you don't know until they happen, right? But it's the last week of the regular season. So then it all counts as a Big Ten regular season game. And then the winners of the semifinals play in the Big Ten championship game. So, but the semifinals couldn't be Ohio State, Michigan. I think there's some stuff where you could tinker with some things where you could create something in between the Ohio State, Michigan game and the Big Ten championship game where you ensure they don't play each other back to back. That's hard to explain on this podcast. If you don't understand what I mean, just forget that I said it. Because here's my real point. I think you could play Ohio State, Michigan week 11, game 11. And I think trying to play Ohio State, Michigan, like to start the year is crazy. I think trying to play it in the middle of the year is crazy. I do think you need to build to it. But I think if you played it in the second to last game of the regular season, you would get almost all of what you get by playing it the last game of the regular season, and you would eliminate the possibility of a back-to-back. And it's much less likely that anything is clinched with 2 regular season games to go. So I think you would enhance the chances of getting the best of both teams. And then I think the last game of the regular season, you just play like that game. Maybe Ohio State plays Maryland. Maybe Ohio State plays Rutgers. Maybe Ohio State plays Indiana. Maybe they play Wisconsin. But the thing of it is, back in the day, the Ohio State-Michigan game as the last game of the regular season was the culmination. It's not diminishing the importance of that game, but it's not the culmination anymore. Because you played Ohio State, Michigan, then you had 8 weeks off and you played the Rose Bowl, and that was it. Now you're trying to get to a Big Ten championship game. And by the way, in the playoff, you're only going to have 2 weeks off between the championship game and the start of the playoff. So it's not a culmination anymore. So you don't think about it the same way. It's really just part of a flow. It's no longer the end. It used to be the end of something. And if you didn't make the Rose Bowl, it actually was the end. That was it. It was the end of your season. It's not the end of your season anymore. It can't be. So if it's not the end of the season and it's not the culmination in terms of logistics and scheduling, it might be in terms of drama and importance, but I don't think you lose a ton of it by playing it in the second to last game of the regular season. You play it game 11, not game 12. And now you slot it in the week before Thanksgiving, where it used to be before things changed when they moved the schedule back and added the bye week and added the 12th game. And we've had this discussion a lot before. Do you like the Ohio State-Michigan game the week of Thanksgiving, or did you like it when it was the week before Thanksgiving? And it's about split. Some people said, I love the tradition of Ohio State-Michigan Thanksgiving week. It brings my family together. We have Thanksgiving on Thursday. We watch the game together on Saturday. We've had other people say, listen, it used to be a great tradition on the Saturday before Thanksgiving, but now everybody's traveling for Thanksgiving, and it throws off the Ohio State-Michigan game. I think if you did it game 11 and you move it back to that second to last Saturday in November, so it's Ohio State-Michigan, then it's Thanksgiving on Thursday, then it's Ohio State-Maryland, and then it's the Big Ten championship game into the playoff, you eliminate the problem. The main problem is back-to-back. The main problem is the game doesn't matter in the standings. You eliminate that. And what do you lose? What do you really lose? Now, if you're just saying, well, it should be the last game, but like, what do you really mean by that? You want to build to it? You want both teams to be at their best, but it's not the only thing on their mind. It's the most important thing on their mind, but it's not the only thing on their mind. The winner of Ohio State-Michigan last year knew that it had to go play the Big Ten championship game the next week. So that's my solution. And I don't think you lose much. You might lose 10%, but it eliminates all the problems. So that's what I would do. And I don't think it has to be that game 12 is the best game, because now it doesn't mean play the Citadel like the SEC does. The SEC has this game 11 where they all play a non-conference game and then they get ready for their rival, right? Go look at the Alabama schedule. Game 11 is the Citadel, it's Tennessee, Chattanooga, it's whatever, that kind of thing. And then they play Auburn. I think there's a solution there. I really do. It's what I would recommend. And then you eliminate the thing that Ryan Day brought up. Okay. This is talking about schedule also. Tyler from Pittsburgh. I hate that the Big Ten doesn't want teams playing night games in November or hosting playoff games as well, and possibly moving the Ohio State-Michigan game to a different time in the schedule. The conference should lean into the traditions and what makes the conference geographically unique. So listen, this is addressing a lot of that, right? I do agree. I think you should lean in while allowing for tweaks. I don't think you can be steadfast. I think you can be steadfast in Ohio State-Michigan should be at the end of the regular season, but that doesn't mean the last game to me. In November, Ohio State-Michigan must be in November. I think that's okay to be steadfast about. And then some of the night games, it's like Ohio State, they're playing the Ohio State-Michigan State game. It's just not that fun to play a night game when you're freezing your butt off, players or fans. So I think that's a logical thing. And then Gene Smith was into the let's play an Ohio State. If Ohio State hosts a playoff game some year because their seeds 5 through 12, he was like, let's play it in Indy. And I think he's backed off that now. I actually like it. because like Indy feels like Columbus anyway. And maybe you love freezing your butts off at a football game, but if you have a roof, why not have a roof? And you're not enhancing Ohio State's chances of winning. You're not. Ohio State enhanced its chances of winning last year, getting inside in a fast track against Georgia. I thought that was a huge part of that game. Get them indoors. They're an indoors team. It's the whole point. That's like some percent chance of why they have a better chance in the playoff than they do against Michigan. Get them indoors. So again, it's like a thing that doesn't exist. The 12-team playoff, campus playoff games don't exist. So the tradition of how dare you not play them in Ohio Stadium because of what? Because they've never existed. How can you have a tradition for a thing that's never existed? So they have to find the right things to hold on to. You can't just dispense with everything. So I understand, Tyler, where you're coming from, but I think we all need to work together to find the context, to find the trade-offs, and I think we can. And I think we can. And I think we can find a way to make it better for everybody. This is Albert from Clifton, New Jersey. The fact that we may have to stay up very late to watch Ohio State versus UCLA or Ohio State versus USC at 10:30, it's like a West Coast start, at 10:30 on the East Coast is concerning, right? There's now going to be 4 West Coast teams in the Big Ten. Clifton in New Jersey. Albert, his name's not Clifton. He's not from Albert, New Jersey. Albert from Clifton, New Jersey is worried about these 4 West Coast teams. Is Ohio State going to be playing these 10:30 p.m. games? I hope it never happens, even though these networks always tend to crave airing these high-profile away games at night. Okay. Here's what we're going to do with this. Here's a plan. And it was sent to me by a reader, and I will tell you that I have shared this plan with, I'm looking it up, with people at Ohio State, and the people at Ohio State said, that's a good plan. You should tell Gene. Jim Armpriester sent me this. His plan is this for the Big Ten. 18 teams. You can think about 18 teams and think, what are we doing? What are you going to do with 18 teams? There's actually a pretty simple solution in a 9-game conference schedule. Jim's solution is that you find one rival for everybody, and it's obvious. You line them up in pairs. It's obvious. You could do it right now and get them all exactly right. Do you want to run through them? Think about them. You're on the treadmill. You're out running. You're shopping right now. You're in your car. Think about them. You're watching at home. Think about them. And you're going to go 9 for 9 on the pairs. Create 9 Big Ten pairs for the 18-team league. Ready? Ohio State, Michigan, Indiana, Purdue, Iowa, Nebraska, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, Northwestern, Oregon, Washington, UCLA, USC, Rutgers, Maryland, and then Penn State, Michigan State. They're kind of like the leftovers, but they made that fake trophy form already, so they'll be okay. They become the rival that you play every single year. It's the only team you play every year. So that's one of your games against the other team in your pair. That leaves 8 other pairs, and you play one of the teams in each pair every year. That's it. That's your 9-game schedule. So if you're Ohio State, you play Indiana or Purdue. You play Illinois or Northwestern. You play UCLA or USC. You play Oregon or Washington every year. And you just figure that out, and you cycle that through, and you wind up getting every team in the conference home and away every 4 years. So it's really simple. You've suddenly explained. Jim is on it. Jim, I said, this is a great idea. He said, are you being sarcastic? I said, no, it's a great idea. I hadn't heard someone say this before. So if you do this, right? Okay, so now let's think about this. And you can maybe, I don't know if you have to tweak a little bit or not. I guess you wouldn't. You wouldn't. So if you think about the 4 West Coast teams in the Big Ten, this is addressing Albert's concern about having to watch Ohio State play at 10:30. If you think about the 4 West Coast teams in the Big Ten, combined, they need to play 18 home games, 18 conference home games in a year, okay? Because 2 of them have to play 5, 2 of them have to play 4, right? With a 9-game Big Ten schedule, every year you either have 5 home games or 4 home games. So those 4 are going to play 18 total. If you pair them up, that's against each other every year. That's 2 of the 18, okay? USC at UCLA, Oregon at Washington. All right, that's 2 of the 18. Now you're playing the opposite pair. So it's like USC at Washington and Oregon at UCLA. And that's 2 more. So now we are down to 14 games that they need. They need 14 home games because they've taken care of 4 of them by playing each other. And that's not even all 3 of them playing each other every year. That's 1 trip per team every year. There's 14 other teams in the league. They each have to make 1 West Coast trip every year. So if you're playing these pairs, you have UCLA, USC as a pair, and Oregon, Washington as a pair. You're playing 1 in each of the pairs. One's at home, one's on the road. So if you're worried about this as an Ohio State fan, it's 1 game a year. It's 1 game a year. And I think there's no one left to play in the non-conference on the West Coast. So they've played in the time that I've been covering the team since 2005. They played a home and home with USC. They played at USC in 2008. They played at Washington in 2007. They were supposed to play at Oregon in 2020, and it got wiped out by COVID. So we're already talking. Michigan was supposed to have a series with UCLA that got canceled. That's why Michigan's non-conference these last 2 years stinks. It was supposed to be a UCLA series. You were already willing to do that once every other year. It's 1 game a year. So I understand being worried about it. It's 1 game a year. They can easily work these logistics that every Big Ten team plays 1 conference game a year on the West Coast. How much of a huge sacrifice is this? Now, the conversations around every other sport, how often they go out there, are very real. But we're talking about a football schedule right now. We're talking about football fans. And by the way, when you play that game, I don't think you want that. If you're Ohio State, they're not going to play at 10:30. They're not. They're not. It's too good. You're going to play it at 5 Pacific, 8 Eastern. They're not going to play Ohio State at 10:30 at night. If they're looking to fill a 10:30 window, because again, the TV contract right now, Fox at noon, CBS at 3:30, NBC at 8. That 10:30 window, maybe they'll play Rutgers at Oregon at 10:30. Maybe they'll play Nebraska at UCLA at 10:30, and they'll have to suck it up once. I bet Ohio State does not have a 10:30 Eastern time start ever until that 10:30 window gets sold to somebody like in a really meaningful way. They'll be playing it at 8 Eastern, 5 local. And it's only once a year anyway. So like, this is some of those things. If you guys are reacting to the changes, you're worried about moving Ohio State, Michigan, move it 1 week forward. You're worried about having to play West Coast teams. It should be once. There's a way to work this. And they're going to have to lean in on the logistics of all this stuff and figure it out. Okay. They have to lean in. They have to solve problems with money. If you are lucky enough in life to be able to solve problems with money, money can solve problems. Money can't buy happiness. Money can solve problems. So I don't know what that means. It's not only money. You can't just say, we'll get a charter plane for the lacrosse team and fly the Ohio State lacrosse team to UCLA. That's not, because it's still time and energy and flights, okay? It's not only a money thing, but it's partly a money thing. And if they're making Olympic sport athletes fly coach and connect through Omaha, we're going to go crazy. So all the money, what are you going to do with the money? They're going to make all this money. They are not going to know what to do with it. Now, what they're actually going to save it for is when they have to pay the players. That's the saving grace to me in most of this stuff is, okay, they're building up the bank for when they pay the players. So they're getting every bit of money, every morsel, every way they can possibly get it, from realignment, from TV contracts. And then they'll pay them. But they have to solve. So, but from a fan standpoint for you, I think there are very logical, fairly simple answers to maintain almost most of what you like about Big Ten football. Not playing Penn State every year is a little bit of a sacrifice, but that's made up by not playing Rutgers every year and not playing Maryland and Indiana every year. Makes up for that a little bit. Ohio State will get, you get some USC. I think that'll be fun. And now, by the way, the non-conference stuff should be all South. All South. You don't have to do any more West Coast stuff. Every non-conference, and I hope they continue to schedule the major non-conference matchups. They have Alabama on the books. They have Georgia on the books. Every one of those should be an SEC team. Ohio State should never play a major. I mean, I guess if they want to, well, I don't know. Do they want to play Baylor or Arizona? I guess. If they want to play a Big 12 team, I guess it's okay. I wouldn't. I'd run through the SEC first, not Vanderbilt. I'd run, not Mississippi State or Kentucky. Kentucky's too close. I'd run through the blue bloods of the SEC. And that's not as much of a travel issue. That's a time zone thing. So I don't think it's as big as a deal as you think. I think it'll be okay. I really think this is going to be okay. And when we get into the details, I'm okay with all of this stuff. Devil's in the details. And when we get into the details, I'll go bonkers if they screw up the details, because they owe that to the fans and they owe it to the athletes and all the other sports. Those are the two main constituencies that need to be taken into account now that they've done all this stuff, because I think the football is going to be good. Okay. A lot of other people sent in beefs. We could not get to all of them. We want to do this on a regular basis. If you want to send me a beef, Doug at themediallc.com. Doug at themediallc.com. I'll take your beefs there. And we might have a way to even more smoothly get your beefs around the corner. So we'll keep you posted on that. For now, make sure you're watching, listening to the podcast daily with the fellas every day. You watch our live show on Monday with Justin Swick and Bobby Carpenter. And we have two more Kings of Columbus coming this week. Bill Landis and I will be talking about defensive stars. And then we have a plan to talk about how many teams in the country really demand a national championship standard. This is playing off something that Gary Danielson of CBS said when I interviewed him at Big Ten Media Days. If you guys didn't catch that, you can find that in this feed where I had interviews with Joshua Perry and Gary Danielson and talking about the TV stuff for this year. He said something about the number of teams in the SEC that have that national championship standard that I don't know if I agree with it, or I don't know if I think it's a good thing, even if I agree with it, because the idea of like, well, this conference is better because it has more teams with unrealistic standards. Awesome. Like, that's better. What's the best thing? What is the best thing about your group? Oh, definitely unrealistic standards that we hold people to. And when they can't reach them because they are unrealistic, we fire them. Great. Cool. Congratulations on your high standards. Everybody should be Saban. Great. That's better? They think it's better. So we'll talk about that. We'll have a discussion about that. But we love you guys being part of it. I'm just super psyched to be here. And Jeremy Birmingham sets up all the stuff so that it sounds good and it looks good. And then I text him and I say, Berm, I screwed it up. And then he fixes it. And he's so nice to me. So thanks to Jeremy Birmingham for making all this possible. And again, just to Berm and Austin Ward and Bill Landis for welcoming me here. And to everybody who has followed me here, who heard me before and is joining in now, man, it's awesome to have you along. Thanks for coming and finding me. And if you're new, if you didn't know, if you hadn't listened to me before, but you love the podcast and you love Berm and Austin and Bill, and you're trying me out, I will say, again, the kind of comments that I get, I used to hate you, or you're annoying, but I'm an acquired taste sometimes. So keep tasting the beef. Keep tasting the beef. That's all we will suggest at this point. Okay. Thanks to everybody who sent in beefs. Can't get to all of them. I read them all. We'll get to more. We'll run through even more on future episodes of this. For now, thanks to everybody who participated. I'm Doug Lesmerises. That was Buckeye Beefs on Kings of Columbus.